Arthur had it all: money in the bank, an enviable collection of luxury cars, and a hard-earned reputation, or at least that's what everyone saw. But that Friday night, while he was driving alone on a nearly empty road, the unexpected hit him head-on, literally. A car came out of nowhere and slammed his vehicle into the road's guardrail. The scene looked like any other accident, but there was something strange about it, as if it had all been planned. If you've ever caught yourself thinking that success shields you from danger, this story gives you a reality check. What seemed like a traffic mistake was actually the first step in a conspiracy. And look, we're not talking about American TV series fiction. It's the kind of thing that shows how danger sometimes comes disguised as coincidence. There, stuck between the steering wheel and hope, Arthur saw his life, or what was left of it, slip through his fingers. Now, if we could go back in time, we might have told him not to take that road, or at least to take a security guard with him. But the truth is that no one expects their life to turn into a crime scenario. And it was in this tense scenario, with the radio off and the city asleep, that Arthur's luck changed. What he didn't know yet was that what came next would be much more painful than any car crash. When the paramedics arrived, Arthur was in desperate condition. Fractures, cuts, and a blow to the head left no doubt. He needed to be put in an induced coma. The hospital became a silent battlefield. On one side, the medical team trying to save him. On the other, the cameras and reporters were stationed at the door, eager for headlines. But it was inside the ICU, where time seems to move more slowly, that the story began to take a sinister turn. Clara arrived as expected, crying loudly, throwing herself on the floor, saying she couldn't live without her husband. And it's funny how human beings are moved by tears, isn't it? Everyone bought into the scene. Doctors, nurses, even the security guards. But have you ever noticed that sometimes the acted pain is more convincing than the real thing? Clara mastered this like no one else. And behind that dark dress and smeared makeup, what was there was a first-class theatre. Meanwhile, Arthur, motionless, was a prisoner of his own body. The induced coma protected him physically, but emotionally he was adrift. He could not react, could not defend himself. He could only listen, and that was the key to everything that came after. In that cold ICU bed, surrounded by machines and assumptions, not only was a serious patient born, but the victim of a plot so well staged that only someone very attentive would be able to notice the cracks in the script. In the eyes of the world, Clara was the devoted wife, the woman who never left her husband's side for even a minute. But a closer look, the kind that reads gestures and not just words, was enough to realize that something wasn't right there. Her crying was timed. Her cell phone was never out of her hand. And her looks had a coldness that not even the air conditioning in the ICU could disguise. It was as if she was waiting for something, and it wasn't Arthur's recovery. Behind the scenes at that hospital, far from the flowers Clara brought to the room, and the emotional posts on social media, there was a name that began to appear like a shadow: Vinicius Duarte. Young, charming, with the charm of a well-dressed street vendor. He was not just a lover, he was the silent accomplice in a plan that placed Arthur as an obstacle to be removed. Their relationship was intense, hidden, and full of promises that went far beyond "I love you." And that's where the script begins to take shape. Clara wasn't just having an extramarital affair. She saw Arthur as an obstacle, someone who needed to be removed from the scene so that her new life could begin. It wasn't just desire, it was calculation. And every time she entered that room, held her husband's hand and whispered sweet words, what was really pulsing there was a cold, strategic plan, full of lies and motivated by a single word: inheritance. Gabriela entered the story as if she didn't want anything. As a new nurse, without much fanfare, she started taking care of Arthur during the early morning shifts, those times when the hospital sleeps. But the secrets whisper louder, and it was precisely in this silence that she began to notice what no one else saw. Clara seemed very committed, but only when there was an audience. When she thought she was alone, her face changed, cold, hard, almost soulless. Have you ever heard the saying, "Instinct never fails"? Gabriella took it seriously. She didn't need a detective degree to realize that Clara was more concerned with controlling than with caring. She chose which doctors could see Arthur, questioned every exam, every procedure. It was a type of surveillance that bordered on authoritarianism. But Gabriella, instead of confronting him, did what few others would do. She observed in silence, took in every detail, and let the puzzle begin to form. And it was during one of these shifts that she first heard something that chilled her to the core. Clara, believing that no one was around, whispered a phrase that left no room for doubt. "If he wakes up, I'm screwed." That kept ringing in Gabriella's head like an alarm that wouldn't go off. From that moment on, she stopped being just a nurse. She became the only line between Arthur and a conspiracy that was about to come to fruition. When the mask starts to fall, the sound is low, and that's how Gabriella captured the essence of what was happening. It wasn't a couple's fight, it wasn't a poorly thought-out mourning. It was really just plain. Clara felt so sure of her own act that one night she confided on the phone, "He's not going to wake up anymore, love." And this love wasn't for Arthur. It was for Vinicius Duarte. Her tone of voice didn't tremble. On the contrary, it was almost professional. These conversations were carried out in a strange routine. Clara spoke softly, disappeared into corners of the hospital, locked the ICU door. "Who does that, people?" Gabriella pretended to be tidying up sheets, cleaning tables, adjusting machines, but her ears were always alert. She didn't need to be in the room to know that Clara was plotting. One day, she caught her saying, "I've already spoken to the lawyer, okay? As soon as I get the certificate, it's all ours." Oh, that was like a punch to anyone who still believed in romantic love. And the cruelest part? Clara did all this while still posting phrases on social media like, "I'm still waiting for you, my love," with a photo of Arthur's hand while he was intubated. It was emotional manipulation at its highest level, with smeared makeup and an empty heart. The game was fair only for those who didn't know the rules. But now Gabriella had more than suspicion. She had context, she had a name, she had a recorded voice and a certainty pulsing in her chest. Arthur was in real danger, and she was going to do something about it. One morning, one of those times when the hospital seems like a ghost ship, something different happened. Gabriella went into the room, did what she did every night, took his blood pressure, checked his signals, and noticed a slight movement in Arthur's fingers. Almost imperceptible but real. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but then his pupils reacted to the light, and that's when her heart started racing. He was coming back, against all medical predictions, and against all Clara's intentions. Arthur opened his eyes slowly, as if emerging from a dark sea. He didn't say anything. His dry throat barely allowed it, but his presence was there, alive and conscious. And most importantly, he remembered. He knew about Clara, he knew about the accident, and even though he didn't understand everything, he felt instinctively that something was very wrong. At that moment, Gabriella made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't tell anyone, not her boss, not the doctors. He needed time. They needed a plan. This choice may seem irresponsible, but it was the only safe way out. If Clara discovered that he was awake, she could act quickly, and badly. It was a chess game in which Arthur was now pretending to be a pawn, while the real move was being made behind the scenes. And it was there, amid the beeping of monitors and dim lights, that the first spark of what would later become a survival strategy was born. The unexpected awakening was not the end of the coma. It was the beginning of silent justice. After the shock of opening his eyes, clarity came. Arthur, even though he was weak, knew that every second was now valuable. He couldn't go around shouting the truth. He needed to plan. And at that moment, Gabriella became more than a nurse. She became an accomplice, a partner, a shield. Together, they began to plot a course of silent action. The rule was simple. No one could know that he had woken up. Only then would they be able to expose Clara and Vinicius without giving them time to react. The plan was bold, but necessary. Gabriella would take care of the practical part. She would continue to be the only one to enter the room, pretending that nothing had changed, but keeping the recorder on whenever Clara appeared. Arthur, from his bed, would start to identify names, phrases, and expressions. Each word spoken would be a new piece in this crime puzzle. What's more, he asked for a new cell phone chip, an untraceable phone, to regain control of his own story, away from Clara's eyes. This phase required patience. It was like playing chess with your eyes closed, hoping not to be checkmated. Arthur was no longer the confident man he once was, but now he had a rare advantage. He knew the enemy, his motives, and he had someone he trusted by his side. And if you think that the hard part is putting together a plan like this, try to stay calm when your wife comes into the room, caresses your face, and tells her lover on the phone that everything is under control. The game was just beginning. Clara's performance continued, as if nothing had changed. She arrived wearing makeup, always with that strong scent of perfume that Arthur knew so well. She sat next to his bed, cried a few tears, caressed his hand, all while believing that he was still in a coma. The problem was that now he could hear her, every word, every sigh. And when her cell phone vibrated and she said, "Hi, love," to Vinicius, Arthur could barely contain the anger that was growing inside. Can you imagine what it's like to pretend to be unconscious while listening to your own sentence being decided? Arthur heard Clara say that she had already spoken to the lawyer, that the inventory was ready, that it was just a matter of time. And the most ironic thing, she did all this with a calmness that bordered on mockery. You were always smart, Arthur, but did you think I would be by your side forever? She whispered before leaving. It was as if she was already dancing on his grave. Outside, in the hallway, Gabriella listened to everything, the recorder on, her heart racing. When she entered the room, she saw in Arthur's eyes that he had heard it too. There was no more room for doubt, only action. It was as if a line had been crossed, a point of no return. They were no longer just protecting the truth. Now they were preparing the counterattack, and each recorded word was a bullet in the barrel of justice that was about to fire. Gabriella knew that suspicion alone was not enough. She needed proof. So, with her cell phone in her pocket and the recorder activated, she began to record everything. Each visit from Clara was an opportunity, and it wasn't long before a revealing conversation was recorded. "Relax, Vinicius, the lawyer already has everything. As soon as the report is released, the money is ours." That was the sentence that sealed Clara's fate. It was clear, direct, with no room for misunderstanding. The conspiracy now had a voice. This audio became a sort of secret trophy between Gabriella and Arthur. It was not only proof of betrayal, but of a cold and premeditated plan. And as much as they wanted to run to the police station, they knew they needed to be strategic. So Gabriella continued her disguise. She smiled at Clara, feigned empathy, while inside she burned with indignation. With each new recording, more pieces fell into place. Lies, emotional manipulation. Clara's script fell apart silently. Arthur, in turn, went from being a passive victim to an attentive player. He analyzed everything, the words Clara used, the times she called, even the dramatic pauses. And the most surprising thing? He maintained his pose. He remained in a coma, breathing deeply, eyes closed, because he knew silent justice needed time. And that ICU, previously a scene of pain, was now the center of a secret operation. Clara just didn't know that she had already lost and was being recorded. The moment came when Arthur could no longer just listen. Even though his body was still weak, his mind was racing. He looked firmly at Gabriella and whispered with effort, "Now she will pay." Those words were not spoken with blind anger, but with the conviction of someone who had lost everything except his dignity. It was the turning point. Silent justice would become concrete action. And what had begun as survival now became strategic revenge. They mapped out the final steps of the plan. A trusted lawyer would be secretly called to the hospital. The recordings would be organized by date and time, and a dossier would begin to be assembled. Arthur asked for a new cell phone, one of those without tracking, bought with cash. Nothing could go wrong. Clara still believed she was in control, but it was precisely this overconfidence that would cause her to stumble. And each visit she made was another chance to bring about her own end. In the bedroom, Arthur maintained his disguise, his eyes closed, his breathing measured, but now he listened more than ever. He felt every step Clara took, every intonation of her voice, every lie she whispered. Gabriella, by his side, was the eyes and ears he couldn't use. And when she said, "It's all recorded, Arthur. Now it's up to you," he didn't hesitate. It was time to act, not with shouting, not with scandals, but with strategy, evidence, and a plan that would bring justice the right way. And now, tell me honestly, if you were in Arthur's shoes, would you be able to remain calm, pretend to be unconscious while listening, day after day, to the person you trusted most planning your death? This story is not just about betrayal or greed. It is a brutal reminder that danger sometimes lies dormant beside us, but it also shows how the truth finds ways, even if silent, to reveal itself. How many times have you ignored your instincts, that inner voice that tells you when something is not right? Gabriella didn't ignore it. She proved that small gestures, when guided by courage, can change everything. And Arthur? He teaches us that, even at rock bottom, it is possible to get back up. With strategy, the right allies, and a clear head, even the best-told lie can fall apart. Now stop and think. Who are your Claras? Are you surrounded by allies or opportunists? What would you do if your life depended on silence? Reflect on that. And if you liked this story, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who loves a good thriller based on hidden truths. Here, each story has something to teach you.